Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Centaurs. Countless giant planets were floating here. Those planets were covered in a layer of light. Runes were jumping around from time to time, making a sizzling sound. And quote, impossible. Even though the three-headed being sent out wasn't very strong, it was still a 10th level life form. It could have completely destroyed the entire solar system. How could it have failed? A cold voice filled with anger was heard. End quote. According to the information he sent back, it seems that a small python broke through the defensive barrier and entered the main body. Then, it instantly released 100 billion living beings through some spatial technique. End quote. A voice immediately replied, 100 billion? Yes. And when it was released, it was very fast, in less than 3 seconds. The most terrifying thing is that those spatial vortexes appear on every part of the three bodies' surface. In other words, in just an instant, our entire three bodies' life forms are completely covered. There's such a space technology? End quote. It's possible. According to our investigation of the person in charge of the snake civilization, he does know how to use some space abilities. I just didn't expect him to be able to put all the creatures of the civilization in those spaces. End quote. Damn it. No matter what, three bodies are still level 10 life forms. Even if we're surrounded, we won't die, right? It's not just that. Those living beings are even more terrifying than the Zergs. At the very least, when the Zergs wiped out some planets and obtained enough food, they would take a period of rest and digestion. However, these guys, every single one of them is like a bottomless pit. They can devour everything without even needing to excrete. End quote. This goes against the natural laws of life. This shouldn't have happened. End quote. But it has already happened. End quote. Continue to observe, bastard. If it really doesn't work, we'll directly smash the entire Milky Way into pieces. End quote. Yes. On the side of the centaurs, the conversation was filled with anger and murderous intent. However, it was obvious. They had completely given up on the three-body life form that was being attacked in the solar system. Walala. Filthy ants. I'm going to take you to hell with me today. The three-body creature continued to growl. Whoosh. As he spoke, he charged towards the nearest star at superluminal speed. As the distance between them closed, the mutated beasts that were devouring the creature could all feel the temperature rise. That guy is going to crash into a star? Damn it. Think of a way. End quote. What's with all the noise? Just continue devouring. This is such a delicious dish. I'm willing to die. End quote. Don't bother about him. The mutated beasts growled. However, eBay couldn't do what they did. End quote. System, with my current physical fitness, if I really hit a star, do I have a chance of surviving? Chi. eBay asked in a low voice, sticking out his forked tongue. A star. It was the sun. It was burning madly at every moment, and the temperature at its core was as high as 20 million degrees. Any living creature could be instantly burned to ashes. Now that he was about to hit the sun, although eBay looked calm on the surface, he was actually very nervous inside. If it really does hit a star on the surface, with host's current physical fitness, it should be able to survive for about 10 seconds. However, the creatures of the other snake civilizations will be reduced to ashes in an instant. The system didn't hold back. Hiss. Yibei felt a chill run down his spine when he heard this answer. Then, if I hit the core, how long can I last? End quote. Not even 0.00001 seconds. Host, if you don't transform into a flood dragon, don't even think about standing shoulder to shoulder with the sun. End quote. The system continued. No matter what, when she said this, eBay felt a strange feeling. Forget it. 10 seconds is more than enough, and I can send them to the spatial fragment at any time. It won't be too late to retreat when they really can't hold on. eBay flicked his tongue. The universe was too big. The closest star to the three-body life form was also a few light years away. With the extreme speed of the three-body life form, it would take at least some time for it to collide with it. End quote. All creatures of the snake civilization, listen up. Speed up the devouring process. Devour as much as you can. These three-body life forms have gone crazy. They are now crashing into a star. If they really hit it, everyone will die? End quote. His spiritual domain covered the area, and his words were instantly transmitted to the minds of all the living creatures. Yes, yes, yes. When the mutated beasts heard Yi Bei's words, they began devouring even more fervently, without stopping at all. As for the fact that they were about to hit a star, these people didn't seem to be worried at all. In their opinion, Yi Bei's spatial fragments were the safest place, and they just had to hide in them. 1 minute. 1/10 of the three-body life had been devoured. Having their bodies devoured in such a manner caused the three-body life form to feel unbearable pain. The howls continued. However, his entire body was covered in it. No matter how this fellow tormented him, it was completely useless. 2 minutes. 3/10 of the three bodies' life had been devoured. And as time passed, the mutated beast's physical fitness was getting stronger and stronger. At least 90% of the mutated beasts had evolved during this process. With the supplement of the genes of a level 10 life form, the strength of each mutated beast was at least 10 times stronger. One grew while the other grew. It was a terrifying process. For minutes later, the speed of the three-body life form was clearly reduced, but the creatures from the snake civilization were getting stronger and stronger. 5 minutes. The speed of the three-body life form was reduced to sublight speed. Previously, it had been roaring and cursing incessantly, but now, other than panting, it could not make any sound. End quote. Looks like I've overestimated this guy. I thought he could really hit the star, but judging from the current situation, he'll be completely devoured half a light year away from the star. End quote. Chi. Yi Bei didn't hesitate any longer. The feeling of devouring a level 10 life form was simply too good. During this process, he once again experienced the pleasure of his strength rapidly increasing every minute and every second. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. The blood in his body was boiling. After 6 minutes, an unbelievable scene appeared. The three-body life form that was twice the size of Earth's had been completely devoured. As for Yi Bei and the countless mutated beasts, after they finished devouring their prey, they just quietly floated in the dark universe. Who? In outer space, it was cold and dark, and no living creature could transmit it. But, at this moment, the heavy breathing of each mutated beast could be heard as they floated in the air. The voice was majestic and earth-shaking. Who. The voice continued. However, there was something more shocking than this sound. What's going on? I feel like my body can move freely in a vacuum, and I can even breathe in here. A mutated chicken exclaimed. We're not breathing, this is just an illusion. Our bodies have already formed a special self-circulation, relying on the large amount of energy we've devoured to regulate and replenish. Breathing is just a biological instinct, and also a kind of energy transfer process. When our energy can self-circulate, breathing naturally has no effect. Beside him, a mutated monkey answered in a wise manner. Then, we can't talk in space, right? What's going on now? Dialogue. Don't be naive. Don't you realize that the voice is directly in our minds and not in our ears? Yeah. End quote. It's unbelievable. Our entire snake tribe civilization can actually survive in space. End quote. It should be because it devoured the three-body life form. End quote. By the way, I feel like there's a lot of new knowledge in my head. What about you guys? Countless mutated beasts were discussing it. Whoosh! At that moment, Golden Lion, Caesar, Wang Wen, and the Blood Moon all flew towards Yi Bei at their fastest speed. Yes, in space, there was no gravity. They could float and control their power, so it wasn't strange for them to fly. King, what do we do next? Roar, roar. The Golden Lion rushed to Yi Bei's side and stopped, growling. Although there was no reflection of light here. However, under the domain of spiritual power, all the mutated beasts could communicate freely. They could even see each other's appearance clearly. This ability seemed to be innate and was extremely strange. End quote. Just now, I realized that my genes have evolved once again. It's so strong. Every action is filled with explosive power. This three-body life form is too strong. The feeling of eating it is really satisfying. End quote. Caesar gritted his teeth. As he spoke, his four limbs were constantly moving, extremely excited. End quote. It's great. But now, all the battleships have been destroyed. We're still in the depths of the universe, and we've completely lost our sense of direction. We're dozens of light years away from Earth. Although we can survive for a while, it won't be a good thing if we stay here for too long, right? Chi. Wang Wen also rushed over. After this evolution, his body's length had actually doubled, reaching more than 5,000 meters. When he was entrenched in space, he flicked his tongue and looked very domineering. Of course, every apostle was extremely domineering at this moment. Go back. Don't worry. After devouring the three-body life form, all of us have gained the power to live freely in space. This means that our biological levels have all been greatly improved. Since it can move at superluminal speed, we can do it too. What we need to do now is to digest all the power we've devoured before, then return to Earth to rest and wait for an opportunity to attack the centaurs. Ibe said calmly. He had also devoured quite a lot of the level 10 genes of the three-bodied life form, which had also brought him a lot of benefits. Ibe had a feeling that, given enough time to evolve, his biological level would definitely increase significantly. Yes. All right. Yes, my king. The spiritual force was transmitted. All the mutated beasts became determined at this moment. With Ibe around, they no longer had to worry about dying in space. The next second, the entire outer space was silent. Hundreds of billions of mutated beasts began to evolve at this time. Who? An incomparably violent energy was brewing in the surroundings. Crack, crack. Every minute and every second, there were countless creatures breaking through, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. As for Ibe, his body floated quietly. End quote. System, after devouring those three body parts, how many evolution points and genetic points did I get? Ibe asked softly. End quote. Evolution points, 170,911 points. Genetic points, 10,000 points. At the same time, you've absorbed a large amount of energy. Next, you can try to convert all of that energy and further strengthen your body. All right, Ibe nodded. Then, he closed his eyes and carefully sensed the energy changes in his body. Three-body life forms were silicon-based life forms. It was a type of stone. Previously, when Ibe was devouring the stones, he could clearly sense that the stones were emitting gray energy. Buzz, buzz. At this moment, countless energy was spreading in his body. It began to collide with every cell. Bang, bang, bang. At the moment of collision, Ibe could even feel an extremely refreshing feeling. There was no pain. It was as if his body was undergoing a brand new transformation. End quote. This feels so good. Moreover, the gray energy seems to be making my body stronger. Other than that, the division and regeneration of my cells have slowed down significantly. End quote. As he felt the changes in his body, Ibe couldn't stop mumbling. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. The gray energy had already completely enveloped Ibe's body. It even gave Ibe the illusion that if he wanted to, he could turn his body into stone and float in this space. All the cells in his body would freeze, and he would never die. But of course, other than these changes, other aspects were also rapidly changing. Strength, body length, diameter, all of them began to increase madly. 30 minutes later, the energy produced from devouring the three-body life forms had been completely digested. Ibe's body was still golden in color, but the color was no longer as striking as before. Instead, it exuded a sense of nobility and low-key. The length of its body had reached a terrifying 10,000 meters, more than 3 times longer than before. Buzz, buzz. He moved his body casually. At that moment, Ibe felt as if his body could blow up a planet with a single blow. End quote. What powerful strength. What level is my body now? Chi. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. After upgrading his body, Ibe stuck out his forked tongue and began to use his mental power domain to observe his body in detail. But, just as Ibe released his mental power domain, his eyes immediately widened. It wasn't just him who had changed greatly. All the living creatures of the Snake Tribe civilization had changed. In the universe, at the edge of the solar system, countless creatures were floating here, uncountable. Even some of the civilizations who were secretly observing this side were shocked beyond words at this moment. Centaurs. And quote, "It's unbelievable. The three-bodied creature we sent out was swallowed whole. The creatures of the snake civilization on Earth got used to the vacuum environment in an instant. The most terrifying thing is that they all began to evolve." End quote. The voice was trembling with fear. "It seems like we've still underestimated them." A hoarse voice immediately answered. End quote, "Everyone, have you noticed that the situation at the edge of the solar system is very similar to the Zergs? There are hundreds of billions of them, and each one of them has a terrifying attack power." End quote. Just when the atmosphere was a little quiet, a voice sounded. Hiss. As soon as he finished speaking, the temperature of the entire centaur seemed to have dropped. Zerg. This kind of creature was invincible in the entire universe. No matter what civilization it was, no matter how powerful it was, they were all filled with fear towards this race. They didn't think much of it just now. But now that he was reminded, he really did discover that the solar system seemed to be filled with Zergs. No, it's not the Zergs. The Zergs are all huge Zergs, and they're controlled by a queen. A single Zerg doesn't pose much of a threat, and they don't have much intelligence. On Earth, it's a completely different situation. They have a huge number of powerful bodies that can continuously evolve. Each creature has its own unique intelligence and can absorb any powerful technology. The most terrifying thing is that they have an existence like the Zerg Queen that can control everything. This voice seemed to be roaring from the centaurs. Who? Then, all the three-bodied creatures in the entire centaur constellation fell silent at this moment. On every three-body life form, countless characters were jumping. They were doing crazy calculations and re-evaluating the creatures on Earth. Zergs with independent intelligence. They were even more terrifying than the real Zergs. The only difference was, the number of creatures in the current snake civilization was not enough, and their biological level had not reached the normal level of the Zerg. However, as they continued to evolve in the future, it was very likely that they would reach the Zerg's level or even surpass the Zerg. After thinking about this, on the side of the centaurs, the cold aura was getting stronger and stronger. And quote, "Whether they're Zergs or not, at least for now, they're starting to show themselves and pose the same threat as the Zergs. With the power of the tri-body civilization, we might be able to wipe them out, but the price we have to pay will definitely be huge, so we have to plan for the long term." End quote. After a long time, a voice came from the centaurs. It was about the new Zerg. They had to be careful. When the three-body civilization had another discussion, at the edge of the solar system, after Yi Bei finished strengthening his body, he spread out his mental power domain and was immediately shocked by his surroundings. This was because the entire snake tribe had finished their evolution. The current situation, their appearance, compared to before, he was on a completely different level. At this moment, the smallest mutated ant was more than 2 meters long. There were long feelers on their heads that were extremely sharp, like sharp thorns. The surface of their bodies was shiny, as if their entire bodies were made of flesh. Furthermore, there were simply too many ants. They were in the tens of billions. It was floating in space. It was terrifying all the time. Other than the ants, the most eye-catching ones were the snake tribe. There were mutated reticulated pythons, mutated blood pythons, and hundreds of other snake species. The shortest one was dozens of meters long, while the longest one was thousands of meters long. Yi Bei was even more so 10,000 meters long. Each snake was constantly flicking its scarlet tongue. When they were suspended in the air, they were like a black mass. This kind of formation was enough to scare the guts out of many living beings. A mutated monkey, a mutated wolf pack, mutant lions, a group of mutated tigers. There were too many of them. They couldn't even count. After scanning the area with his mental power domain, Yi Bei was absolutely certain that the overall strength of the current snake civilization was at least 100 times stronger. Just the ability to survive in the universe was already heaven-defying enough. If he were to encounter a three-body life form again, he would have nothing to fear. Good, very good. Yi Bei couldn't help but exclaim after he had a comprehensive understanding of the overall strength of the snake tribe civilization. At the same time, he immediately asked the system in his mind. "System, This time, we are devouring a level 10 life form. What is the level of our snake tribe's overall strength? Apart from that, what's the average level of each creature? When he asked this question, Yi Bei's voice was filled with anticipation. This was the most important thing. As for the level of creatures and civilization, at the moment, Yi Bei had a rough idea of what was going on. This was because of the unequal information, so he still had to ask the system for more details. End quote. Because they devoured a three-body life form and fused with a large amount of knowledge. In addition to the knowledge from the beast god civilization, the snake civilization as a whole is currently at level 5, 2 levels higher than before. However, as they become more familiar with the knowledge and use it, the civilization level will still show a large increase. In addition, their creature level has reached level 6 on average, and the host's own level has reached level 8. This is something worth being happy about. The system said seriously. Level 6? Level 8. To be honest, Yi Bei didn't have much of an understanding of this. In his opinion, this was just a bunch of data. What he cared about was power. After leveling up, how much power would he gain? End quote. A level 5 civilization has an average of level 6 life forms. I'm a level 8 life form. System, what is your exact strength? Yi Bei continued to ask. End quote. As for power, the host can bring the snake tribe civilization here to test it out. The universe is vast, and no matter how many of them there are, it won't be too crowded. Moreover, in this place, all living beings can fully utilize their power. End quote. That makes sense. Yi Bei nodded in agreement with the system's answer. Then, he decisively said to all the creatures of the snake tribe civilization, end quote. All right, from now on, everyone can freely test their strength here. After the test, we'll begin returning to Earth. End quote. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Yes. 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 At the edge of the solar system, all the snake tribe creatures were boiling with excitement. After their bodies had been upgraded, they had long wanted to test their strength at the edge of the solar system, even though there was a certain distance between them and the nearest star. However, there were still many other barren planets around. After he confirmed that he wanted to test his strength, Yi Bei led all the mutated beasts and began to search for the nearest planet. The conditions on these planets might be very harsh, but to the current snake civilization, none of that was a problem. 10 minutes later, they had found a huge planet at the edge of the solar system. The total area was at least 10 times larger than Earth. On one side of the planet, due to its proximity to the star, the temperature was extremely high, reaching more than 200 degrees. Due to its huge size and the long period of revolution, the temperature on the back was more than negative 100 degrees. Everyone, after the test on this planet, please return to Earth. Yi Bei said calmly. Who? The huge spiritual power domain covered the entire planet in an instant. As soon as the voice fell, the surface of the planet immediately underwent a great change. Countless destructive actions that could be broken happened here. Boom, boom, boom. A mutated giant gorilla, with a height of more than 20 meters, dark red fur, and deep red eyes, stood on the surface of the desolate planet and punched the ground. This punch, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. He was extremely powerful. Crack, crack. Along with the rumbling sound, cracks as thick as water buckets appeared on the ground, which was a shocking sight. So strong. This power is really powerful. End quote. This body can completely resist missiles, right? When the mutated gorilla's fist landed, many creatures around them exclaimed. Some of them had envy in their eyes, while some others expressed jealousy. However, soon, other creatures stood up. End quote. It's indeed very strong. However, if it's only based on strength, it's not enough. End quote. A pitch-black ant slowly walked out. His body was 3 meters long. His body was like waxed metal, very smooth. When he stood next to the gorilla, he looked very small, but no living creature dared to look down on him. Ever since he obtained the evolution potion, the ants that had once been crushed by all the living creatures had their status rapidly elevated in the snake tribe civilization. His combat strength, wisdom, their overall strength. To a certain extent, they had even surpassed the snake race. Who doesn't know how to talk big? If you can do it, then go. The surrounding mutated beasts were watching the commotion and were in awe of the ant. However, the gorilla was not polite at all. After all, it was the one being ridiculed. "All right, I'll show you true power," the ant said indifferently. This guy was indeed very arrogant, and he really deserved a beating. However, in the next second, the fellow stretched out his two legs. Without much force, he lightly patted the ground, and an extremely shocking scene appeared. Crack, crack, crack. The entire land seemed to have suffered a terrible attack. The ground immediately cracked like a spider web, and each crack was more than a few meters wide, looking extremely terrifying. When the furious gorilla saw this, its body trembled slightly, and it couldn't help but take a few steps back. Hiss! The countless mutated beasts in the surroundings were all crazily sucking in cold air. So strong. End quote. To be honest, it's really unbelievable. Who would have thought that an ant could become so strong? End quote. It's not analyzed that way. Ants are originally strongmen. After they evolve and grow in size, their strength will naturally increase. In fact, the smaller a creature is, the more powerful it will become after evolution. In detail, living things are really a wonderful thing. End quote. Yeah, more importantly, there are too many mutated ants. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. However, just as the beasts were marveling at the mutated ant's strength, an extremely loud noise was heard. This voice seemed to have entered deep into the soul. Even the entire planet trembled a few times. What's going on? End quote. What a powerful force. Who is this? End quote. It's too terrifying. I feel like the sound waves are tearing my body apart. End quote. Who is it? Countless mutated beasts started looking around. Soon, they had determined their target. The king, it's the king. Some creatures shouted. Where is it? Some of the creatures stood on their tiptoes. Get out of the way, I want to see it too. Some of the more powerful mutated beasts roared in a low voice. It's too scary. The eyes of the gorilla that had been pounding the ground were bloodshot. End quote. It's impossible to guess the king's strength. I feel like I'll die if I'm touched by this power. End quote. The flamboyant mutated ant trembled slightly. His previous pride and confidence had all disappeared, replaced by fear. Not only them. When Yi Bei was testing his strength, all the mutated beasts on the entire desolate planet were alarmed. The stronger ones could still stand. Those who were weaker, immediately prostrated on the ground, unable to make any sound. At this moment, on a desolate planet, an area completely covered in cold air, Yi Bei, whose entire body was golden, was coiled up in this place. Chi. On his back, all the spine spikes had been extended, shining with a cold light, and could cut through anything. Its body length had reached 10,000 meters. Its diameter had reached several hundred meters. Just that alone was enough to give all the creatures a terrifying sense of oppression. Roar! He growled. At that moment, Yi Bei was so focused on testing his strength that he didn't realize that his actions had attracted the attention of all the mutated beasts. Crack, crack. He focused his attention. The muscles in his body all burst out, making a crisp cracking sound, which was extremely strange. Boom. When he had stored enough energy in his body, Yi Bei no longer hesitated. The 10,000-meter body was slammed into the ground. Boom, boom. A loud sound rang out. Walalala. Immediately after, the entire planet began to shake violently. The ground cracked. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. In the surroundings, there were loud rumbles as volcanoes erupted one after another, spewing out hot lava. 1 second. 2 seconds. The surrounding creatures finally reacted. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. It's going to explode. One hit. This planet is going to explode. Quick, leave this planet and escape into space. This is too terrifying. However, when those creatures came to their senses, all they could hear were the same sounds, and their eyes were filled with fear, strength, unparalleled power. To be honest, even Yi Bei himself didn't know how strong he was now. But there were a few things that were certain. First, with Yi Bei's current physical strength, he could completely withstand a nuclear bomb without dying. Second, if he encountered another storm of spatial fragments, Yi Bei could get swept into it with his physical body. Third, Yi-Bei was completely convinced that if he were to return to Earth, if human civilization still existed, a casual blow from him would be enough to completely destroy a country. But Yi-Bei had never expected that his full power attack would be so terrifying. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. There was a huge vibration. It was truly a landslide. Countless cracks appeared on the ground, each of them several kilometers wide. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. When the mutated beasts that were originally crawling on the ground realized that something was wrong, they stomped on the ground with all their might. Fortunately, the gravity of this planet was extremely low. With enough strength, these guys directly rushed into space. 1 kilometer, 10,000 meters, 100,000 meters. When they reached an altitude of 100,000 meters and looked in the direction of the planet, their eyes all widened. In his line of sight, with Yi-Bei as the center point, terrifying cracks began to spread in all directions on the planet, which was 10 times larger than Earth, at an extremely fast speed. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. Whoosh. Moreover, as the cracks grew larger, dark red lava gushed out, and the frozen side instantly turned into a sea of fire. And this was only the beginning. Crack, crack. The entire planet was collapsing bit by bit. In less than a minute, the entire surface of the planet was covered in spider web-like cracks, and it could explode at any time. And NBSB, whoosh. Seeing this, the mutated beasts that had escaped into space could no longer remain calm. King, isn't this too strong? Asterisk roar, asterisk. The golden lions first stood on end as it let out a low roar. After devouring his life for 3 days, he thought that his strength had increased to a terrifying level. But now, it seemed that he was just a weakling. End quote. I estimate that even if we continue to evolve, we still can't surpass the king. End quote. Chi. Wangwen flicked his tongue. Their eyes were filled with fear and respect. End quote. That planet is going to explode. And this is only one attack from the king's body. You must know that the king has countless abilities. If he uses those abilities, it will definitely be even more terrifying. End quote. Caesar said. Buzz. Buzz. As for the entire snake tribe civilization, the hundreds of billions of mutated beasts were even more shocked. When their voices were transmitted through their mental strength, there were too many of them, and in the end, they formed a buzzing sound. While all the mutated beasts were marveling at Yi-Bei's strength. At this moment, Yi-Bei's body was still coiled up on the desolate planet that was crazily splitting apart. End quote. This power is really strong. I wasn't careful, and it actually directly blew up a planet. End quote. Yi-Bei mumbled as he stuck out his forked tongue. As an 8th grade life form, it's very normal for it to be able to do this. Host, you still have a long way to go on the path of evolution. You should know that 3-body life forms are capable of dimension reduction attacks. They can even smash the entire solar system into pieces, let alone a planet. However, compared to before, you are indeed much stronger. Just as Yi-Bei was beginning to gain a better understanding of his own strength, the system rudely reminded him. Okay, he had to admit that the system was right. So what if they destroyed a planet? As long as he could continue to evolve, his future path was still long. End quote. This planet is too weak. Looks like I'll have to find another place to test my strength. End quote. Yi-Bei continued. He exerted a little force. Boom. When it hit the planet again, the entire planet exploded. Yi-Bei's body instantly rose to an altitude of more than 100,000 meters. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. Boom. High up in the sky, Yi-Bei could clearly see the exploding planet. First, the entire planet was covered in a layer of spider web. After that, an incomparably majestic power gushed out from the Earth's core. Walala, the hot lava continued to gush out. This process lasted for about 10 seconds. Then, an extremely magical scene appeared. The planet, which was originally more than 10 times larger than Earth, suddenly began to shrink rapidly. Under the illumination of the star, it started to turn pitch black. How terrifying. Is this guy shrinking and becoming a dwarf? Or should I say, become a new star? No, I keep feeling like he's going to explode. An explosion? To be honest, I'm really looking forward to the explosion of a planet. In space, The mutated beasts were making noises and their eyes were bulging. After all, this scene was too shocking. They had never seen or heard of such a thing. Boom, boom, boom. Finally, under the speculation of countless mutated beasts, the desolate planet that had been compressed to the extreme seemed to have become a black hole. All light was devoured by it, and a huge amount of energy was brewing. After another 5 minutes, the planet did not become a star. Instead, it exploded in space. Silence. Brilliant. His ears could not hear anything, but he could feel his soul and spirit trembling. The shrunken, desolate planet expanded rapidly. It was originally like a black hole, but after it began to expand, the light it released was at least 100 times stronger than before. The planet was also 100 times larger. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. This voice resounded in the soul. When it expanded to its limit, the planet completely exploded. Countless flaming rocks were flying through space at an unbelievable speed. It really exploded. The entire planet exploded just like that. Crazy. This is crazy. And quote, this scene, I feel that no words or language can be used to describe it. End quote. This is the power of the king's full power strike. Bang, bang, bang. The power of the planet's explosion was simply too great. In the dark universe, a terrifying storm was set off in an instant. A large number of gravel hit the mutated beasts of the snake civilization, making muffled sounds. The explosion was extremely terrifying. However, the snake civilization was very fast. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. The impact of the rocks was not enough to cause them any harm, but the scene was deeply engraved in the hearts of all the mutated beasts. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Yibei hovered in space. When he saw the planet shatter into countless shards of rock and finally disappear completely under the impact of the explosion, he slowly said, "Let's return to Earth. If we encounter other planets on the way, we'll continue to test our strength." Earth. In the Human Federation. Almost all the high-ranking human figures were here. End quote. In order to deal with the three-bodied civilization, almost all the mutated beasts in the entire snake civilization were mobilized. However, some creatures were left on Earth. Those who remained were basically high-level officials who didn't have much combat power or scientific research creatures. I don't know what the result was. End quote. An old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles said, his body trembling slightly, "If we lose, the entire solar system will be destroyed." Someone replied, "Then, how's the situation at the scene?" End quote. I can't see the latest situation. Even at the speed of light, it will take some time to send feedback. I can only see that the human battleships were all smashed into pieces by the three-body life form. No matter what, the result of this battle can be seen now. Billions of humans have been sacrificed and turned into dust in the universe. It's really tragic. End quote. What's the point of saying all this? End quote. Even if those people all die, I still hope that the snake civilization can win. End quote. Yup. In the Federation, the higher-ups of the human race all had solemn expressions and hoarse voices. Other than them, all the living beings in the solar system were staring at the screen. He didn't drink water. She didn't eat anything. He didn't go to the toilet. He didn't even dare to blink. You must win. Yes, definitely. Kill that three-body being. The sounds of prayers gathered together. And at this moment, in the endless darkness of outer space, Yibei was leading the horde of mutated beasts as they shuttled back and forth. There's another planet in front of us. Without any life. Let's use it for testing. Caesar was overjoyed. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. A few seconds later, the planet was once again destroyed by Yibei's attack. However, this time, all the mutated beasts were smart. They could devour without limit. Not only ordinary carbon-based life forms, but silicon-based life forms could also be their food. Every planet had an endless amount of resources. Therefore, when the planet exploded again, all the mutated beasts' first reaction was not to run away, but to rush forward. No matter what terrible material was hidden in the debris of the explosion, they would devour it without hesitation. 1 pill. 2. 10. Along the way, more and more planets were destroyed, and the creatures of the snake civilization were devouring more and more. His overall strength had been continuously increasing along the way. And just as eBay led hundreds of billions of mutated beasts to devour the 22nd planet, the entire universe, the entire solar system, all the creatures who were observing the battle in the dark were shocked. The first was the centaurs. From the beginning, those three-body creatures had never looked at Earth in the eye. They even thought that the creatures on Earth were a group of ants that they could easily crush at any time if they wanted to. However, as the snake civilization continued to display unimaginable power, the Three Skies life forms felt that their views had been refreshed again and again. So much so that, after the snake civilization easily destroyed 22 planets, they all changed. End quote. To destroy a planet, and each time, just one attack is enough. To be able to do this, their creature level must have increased again, right? His voice was hoarse, filled with disbelief and shock. What do we do now? Didn't you notice? The first planet they destroyed turned into countless rocks and flew away, but the planets after that were all devoured by them. The scariest thing was that we didn't detect any waste residue in the solar system after devouring them. Immediately, a voice was heard. End quote. Devouring, and then turning it into energy 100%. The more it devours, the stronger it becomes. End quote. Well, from the current situation, that's the truth. End quote. Even the Zergs can't do a 100% transformation, right? It seems like we're really in big trouble this time. Once they're allowed to develop, the solar system, the Milky Way, and our centaurs will all be completely destroyed. We might even become their prey. End quote. Speed up. Launch a dimension reduction attack on the entire galaxy. End quote. I have to do this. This time, the entire three-body civilization came to a consensus. The potential of the snake civilization was too terrifying, and they had to be destroyed before they could fully mature. Other than the three-body civilization, in the depths of the universe, a giant space snake's speed also slowed down. So powerful, the speed of evolution is too fast. After he stopped, he said unconsciously. A majestic mental force spread out. To be honest, the space snake was really shocked to see planets being destroyed one after another. His power was definitely not this strong before. How long has it been? The most terrifying thing is that there are hundreds of billions of them. Other than that python, the other creatures haven't shown their true strength yet. Chi. He kept flicking his tongue out, and his eyes were heavy. Comparable to the Zergs. Damn it. Whoosh. After saying this, the space snake became even more talkative. First, that terrifying spiritual power frantically spread out into space. If there was someone familiar with the space snake, they would know that he was sending a message. My fellow race members, in the solar system, I've discovered a large number of mysterious life forms. They have an infinite amount of devouring power. Even planets can be completely devoured and become a part of their bodies. They're getting stronger by the second. These creatures have the potential to surpass the Zergs, but they're still in their early development stage, and their entire territory is limited to the solar system. No matter what kind of creature it is, as long as we, the space snakes, use our massive mental power, we can control them. Everyone, the opportunity is right in front of you. This was the message that the space snake had sent out through its spiritual force. With this information, the images of the snake tribe civilization devouring the three-body life forms and the planet were also transmitted directly through mental power. Chi. After a few seconds, in the vast universe, one pair of eyes after another suddenly opened. The universe is so big, and there are indeed all kinds of wonders. I have to make a trip to the solar system. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Once you miss such a good opportunity, it'll be hard to come by again. The creatures that had opened their eyes all made the same sound. It wasn't just the ability of the snake civilization. More than that, all the living beings could faintly feel a great threat. As for future updates, if I'm not wrong, I'll update 2 chapters a day. Because I've started a new book, I have to make sure that there are updates. If anyone is interested, you can take a look at my new book, 90,000 Years of Longevity, at the Edge of the Solar System. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. The number of planets that exploded and were devoured had already reached 30. This devouring process of evolution This directly caused the strength of the creatures of the entire snake tribe civilization to increase by several levels. At this time, the images of the battle between the snake tribe civilization and the three-body civilization were finally sent back to Earth. The Human Federation and NBSB, whoosh. The humans who had stayed behind were all breathing rapidly, and their faces were flushed. And quote, "It's actually going to devour that three-body life form. That's crazy." End quote. The former president of the United States clenched his fists and said in a hoarse voice, "This is too shocking. This scene is too crazy. The creatures of the other races have clearly treated that three-body life form as food. If they continue to devour it like this, they'll definitely become stronger, right?" The Russia emperor's body trembled. End quote. "We've really suffered a great loss this time. The other races have all become stronger after devouring that monster. On the other hand, not only did the humans not gain any benefits, but they also suffered heavy losses in this war." End quote. The Chinese leader's face was red and hot. When he said this, his heart was filled with an unprecedented unwillingness and regret. AI. The consequences of a single mistake cannot be made up for. Don't be so stupid in the future. End quote. When the snake god and the others return, we'll propose to leave Earth and find a new planet to develop. End quote. The sounds continued. As for Guyu, she was there too, but she had been listening quietly. Yibei didn't let her go to the battle against the three-body civilization. She knew very well that Yibei must have lost a certain amount of trust in her because of what had happened to the humans. There's no need to leave Earth. Now that the snake god has returned, we'll deal with him however we want. If we want to continue to develop the human race, we have to get the snake god's approval. Also, don't forget that this incident is too vile. Even if the snake god agrees, what will the other races think? On the screen, Guyu watched Yibei lead the creatures of the snake tribe civilization to defeat the three-bodied creature and devour it completely. Her face was pale, and her voice was emotionless. "But we humans have to develop. Miss Guyu, is there really no other way? I'm really unwilling to accept this." End quote. After all, we were once the leaders of this Earth. Even if there was a change in dynasties, the new leader would definitely leave a few of the previous dynasties bereaved behind. This is already a rule. End quote. I must beg the snake god. The human high-ranking officials were stunned for a moment upon hearing Guyu's words. Then, they began to speak one after another. He looked at these guys. Guyu's gaze grew even colder. After being modified by Yi Bei's mental power, she subconsciously wanted to help the snake tribe. However, Guyu was still a human. Human blood flowed in her bones and genes. There were some things that could not be completely changed by spiritual power alone. But the actions and words of these humans had truly disappointed Guyu. The snake god's wisdom is not something we can fathom. You don't have the final say in what to do. Whoosh. Guyu didn't hesitate any longer after she said that. She turned around and walked outside, leaving behind the human upper echelons, all of them staring at each other. In fact, in the solar system, other than humans, the other creatures that stayed behind had a completely different attitude. "Huh, we won. What? I thought that three-body life forms would be very strong, but it turns out that they're just SOSO trash. What a pity. If only I was there. I wonder what the taste of an alien creature is like. Such a big ball of meat. It must be very delicious. If there's a chance next time, the first thing I'll do is to ask the king to bring me there. Wait for the king's return." The other creatures all cheered. The death of the three-body life form. The heavy burden on all the living beings disappeared instantly. At the same time, they were filled with hope for the future and the entire snake tribe civilization. 10 days later, Yi Bei, leading the snake tribe civilization, was finally about to reach Earth. When the densely packed snake tribe army appeared outside the Earth's atmosphere, they directly blocked all the sunlight. That majestic aura was extremely terrifying. "King, we have too many people. If we land all of them on Earth, we definitely won't be able to fill up the space. Now that everyone could move freely in space. How about this? All the creatures of different races could return to their own places. For example, let the ant tribe return to the moon." Caesar, who was floating in the air next to Yi Bei, said seriously as he looked at the blue planet. N. Yibei nodded. Indeed, after 10 days of evolution, all the creatures had grown at least 3 times in size. The small Earth could no longer hold anything. Walala. After getting Yibei's approval, the mutated beasts all rushed back to their own planets as fast as they could. In the following time, he had integrated part of the information from the three-body civilization and the technology from the beast god civilization. The entire solar system had started to develop rapidly. Every day, it was a complete change. Just the first day, the hundreds of thousands of battleships that had been destroyed by the three-body creature were being manufactured in batches again. In fact, the number of battleships had doubled, reaching more than 1 million. As long as the snake civilization was willing, this number could even expand to more than 100 million. The next day, all the major planets had undergone tremendous changes because they had devoured three-body life forms and a large number of planets. All the mutated beasts had gained the ability to survive in space. This was definitely the key to the continuous development of a civilization. Originally, Mars, Jupiter, and other planets had to be modified to be suitable for living. But now, all those modifications were no longer needed. Construction. After the creatures returned, they only crazily built the city. Huge skyscrapers appeared. There were all kinds of magical buildings. All the living facilities had been greatly improved. The third day, more and more creatures began to march into space. The solar system was still too small. The various races were expanding rapidly, and this place was gradually unable to satisfy their living needs. And when the entire snake tribe civilization entered a period of rapid development, Yibei, who was based in Donghai City, the center of Doomsday City, read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. His eyes narrowed. In his heart, he was thinking about something else. End quote. The worm dragon's body is in the hands of the Trinity civilization on the Centaurs. I have to go there once a month. End quote. He flicked his tongue. Yibei's voice was cold. Three-body life. A flood dragon. Centaurs. Over the past few days, Yibei had been thinking about these things the most. After all, this was the key to his next step in evolution. However, on the fourth day, Guyu walked up to Yibei. Yibei, after your return, you haven't announced what to do with the remaining humans. They're very uneasy. The entire human race is now in the Federation headquarters. Even Morpheus and the Lost Race from Area 51 are there. Guyu said as she entered the main topic. To be honest, Yibei had indeed been a little angry at the time when humans had been used as bait and sacrifices to attack three-bodied creatures. So many days had passed. He really didn't want to do anything to the remaining humans. Now that Guyu had mentioned it, Yibei recalled that a small group of humans and other creatures had been left behind on Earth to deal with the three-body creature. If I'm not wrong, Morpheus and the rest of the Lost Race would never betray us. As for the humans who were still alive, they would develop on Earth for the time being. However, from today onwards, all humans would be at the bottom of the Snake Tribe civilization. No human was allowed to participate in any key positions. Guyu, I'm sure you can totally understand this. Yibei said calmly. Yes. Guyu nodded. Originally, humans could have risen because of her becoming an apostle. However, he was seeking his own death. The fact that Yibei was willing to let the rest of the humans live was already a great show of mercy. What else do you want to say? After Yibei finished speaking, he noticed that Guyu had no intention of leaving. He narrowed his eyes slightly and asked calmly. No, I'm fine. Guyu's body trembled slightly. She wanted to say something, but she did not in the end. End quote. I remember now. There's still something I need to deal with. Yibei, I'll take my leave first. End quote. Guyu left in a hurry after she finished speaking. Host, this human obviously still has some unsolvable feelings for you. After Guyu completely disappeared, the system's voice suddenly rang out in Yibei's mind. Don't say such things again. I've said it before. Guyu and I are impossible. I'm a snake, and she's a human. Some creatures dare to cross species, but at least I'm not ready for it yet. Yibei's voice was extremely cold. End quote. All right. Host, when do you plan to attack the centaurs? The system continued to ask. The voice was somewhat bewitching. just as eBay was about to answer. And NBSB, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A silver-white shadow was rushing toward them at high speed. It was Caesar, the king. What is it? Recently, we have completely deciphered all the technology of the beast god civilization. We can start building the wormhole. Also, we have already sent out a tractor. As long as it reaches the Centaur constellation, it will be fully built. By then, through the wormhole, our snake civilization's army will only need an hour to reach the Centauri. Caesar continued. An hour? A wormhole? This was good news. How long will it take to complete the wormhole? EBay asked, secretly looking forward to it. The tri-body civilization would definitely want to destroy the solar system. What would happen if they found out that the snake civilization had already gotten behind their home when they made their move? Just thinking about it was exciting enough. In order to construct a wormhole, we need a fixed coordinate. This is to ensure that we can teleport to a habitable planet. Now that our snake tribe civilization has obtained the power to survive in space, as long as it's not a star, we can survive. Therefore, the construction speed has increased a lot. Furthermore, the tractor had already been launched toward the Centaurs when it created the wormhole. It would arrive in about 10 days. As for the space fragments and the energy required to construct the wormhole, we have already prepared them. We can guarantee that it will be completed within 10 days. Caesar said excitedly. He was just asking for the time, but this guy explained a lot of things in a very professional way. Very good. During this period of time, all the living beings were madly exploring the solar system, and even many planets in the Milky Way system had begun to migrate. Tell those living beings to expand without restraint. We will attack the Centaurs in 10 days. Chi. eBay flicked out his tongue, his decision made. He had to make a trip to the Centaurs. However, after Caesar heard this, his eyes lit up and he had no intention of leaving. End quote. King, even though we are ready to go out, the solar system's location is still a big flaw. This is equivalent to telling all the creatures in the universe our exact location. Once they have the opportunity, they will attack. End quote. I know that, but do you have a solution? eBay flicked his tongue. To be honest, he did have an idea about this problem, but he felt it was too crazy and didn't try it. My king, with our current level of technology, we can completely cut up spatial fragments in batches. Before I came here, I had a discussion with many experts in this field. Space fragments are actually like some broken mirrors. In fact, through some special means, these space fragments can all be glued together. And NBSB, whoosh. When he said this, his expression became more and more excited. End quote. What you mean is to create a large space fragment to contain the entire solar system, or rather, the foundation of the snake civilization? eBay instantly understood what Caesar meant. In reality, eBay had originally thought the same. However, he had wanted to move all the creatures in the solar system to the spatial fragments he had devoured and start a new life. Without a doubt, Caesar's suggestion was more practical and crazier. Yes, my king, now that we've cut out a huge space in the Milky Way system, we can put the Earth inside, and then compress that space and put it in the forest of death. This way, no civilization will be able to lock onto our location. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Caesar expressed his thoughts. However, after Yi Bei heard this, he immediately discovered something terrifying. End quote. End quote. According to your method, some higher civilizations would have placed their mother planets in an independent space long ago. You can't find it in the universe. It's 100% possible. This is the best way for a civilization to survive and not be treated as prey. Caesar nodded. At that moment, Yi Bei suddenly felt that the world was becoming more and more mysterious. If Earth is placed into the space debris, the environment here will definitely change drastically, right? In the universe, every planet is complementary to each other and forms a logical cycle. Have you solved all these problems? Yi Bei continued to ask. Her heart was beating faster and faster. If he could really accomplish this, it would definitely be a great thing. Caesar was extremely confident. End quote. Your Majesty, in our solar system, all the planets have built a self-circulation system. The sun is only a low-level energy source. If we place Earth in the space debris, we are completely confident that it will be able to maintain its current state. End quote. End quote. How long will it take to load the entire solar system into the space debris? eBay asked. End quote. In fact, we've already created a space fragment that can accommodate the entire solar system. The most difficult thing is to stick them back together. This has been left to Area 51 to do. Morpheus and the scientists have already mastered the space fusion technology. End quote. Oh, eBay's interest was aroused. Although he was very intelligent, the things that he could do as an individual were too limited. Even he did not expect that the Snake Tribe civilization could actually adhere to the space debris in such a short time. King, why don't we go together? Caesar suggested. It just so happened that eBay was a little bored staying in Doomsday City during this period of time. After hearing Caesar's words, he immediately agreed. All right, let's go now. Area 51. When the Human Federation was established, Area 51 became part of the Snake Tribe civilization. The current Area 51 was located on what was once the Mongolia grassland. There, a very wide research base had been built. Moreover, the buildings and facilities here were much more complete than those of the 51st district. And at this moment, Morpheus, Neo, Trinina, and a group of scientists were carrying out intense calculations. End quote. Mayor, space fragment number 9 has collided with space fragment number 11. All parameters are normal. The fusion is in progress. The huge power conversion rate is 55%. Do you want to continue the fusion? Einstein's fingers flew as he typed on the computer keyboard, his voice extremely serious. Continue, as long as the energy conversion rate is above 50. Morpheus nodded. All right, pa. As he spoke, Einstein continued to operate. The calculator he was using now was definitely not ordinary. On the screen of the calculator, there were 2 polygonal fragments. Under his control, the 2 fragments were colliding little by little, and the sharp edges were merging together. Below the calculator screen, there were all sorts of strange symbols and numbers that ordinary living beings would not be able to understand. All right, Mayor, the number 1 and number 3 fragments have completed the fusion. The degree of fusion has reached 100%. Someone said, his voice filled with excitement. End quote. Mine is only 11% away from completion. This kind of fusion is too difficult. End quote. The one who said this was Newton, his expression somewhat regretful. Pa. Just as these people were focused on the operation, they didn't notice that Caesar and Yi Bei, who had used their shape-shifting abilities to shrink themselves, had already quietly entered the operation room. The king, Morpheus, was the first to notice Yi Bei. However, before he could say the word king, Yi Bei's voice rang out in his mind. Don't say anything. I'm just here to take a look, so I don't affect their work. Hearing Yi Bei's voice, Morpheus had no choice but to pretend that he didn't know anything and continue with his work. However, his appearance unconsciously changed at this moment. After all, Yi Bei and Caesar's auras were simply too powerful. It would be strange if Morpheus could still remain calm under their watchful gazes. End quote. Dimension number 22 and dimension fragment number 23 are currently fusing. The power is too strong. This fusion is estimated to produce 10,000 spiritual pearls. Mayor, should we consume water and draw the power from that place back? In the control room, there was a constant sound. Who? When Yi Bei and Caesar arrived and saw the densely packed supercomputers and the huge screens, they took a deep breath. To be honest, this was definitely a miracle when technology had reached its peak. Under his gaze, Yi Bei seemed to be able to clearly sense that in the depths of the Milky Way, in a space without any life, countless majestic energy-cutting lines were constantly colliding with each other. It could produce terrifying power at any moment. Those energy lines seemed to have appeared out of thin air. After the pieces of space were cut, they were immediately reassembled under the control of the scientists in Area 51. Yi Bei couldn't explain the theory behind it. 1 minute. 3 minutes. Yi Bei and Caesar had been there for a full 3 minutes before someone noticed their presence. As Snake God. When a scientist saw Yi Bei, his body froze for a moment before he instinctively called out to him. The speed was too fast. This time, Yi Bei didn't even have time to stop her. Someone spoke. As soon as the voice rang out, all the scientists in the entire control room immediately turned to look at Yi Bei in a daze. At the same time, He stopped his work immediately. At this time, Morpheus also set his eyes on Yi Bei. King. He spoke slowly, and his eyes were filled with submission. And quote, I heard from Caesar that you guys were merging the space debris, so I came to take a look. To be honest, after seeing this, it's really unbelievable. I didn't expect that the space debris was cut out like this. End quote. Now that he had been completely discovered, Yi Bei had no choice but to remain calm and explain his purpose for coming. End quote. King, the current fused space fragment can contain Earth, but it's still too small. Our plan is to contain the entire solar system. If there's a war, no civilization can hurt us without going through space. Also, with this thing, the snake race can bring the entire solar system and roam the universe. End quote. After Morpheus found an opportunity, he immediately began to speak to Yi Bei. I've heard from Caesar that you've done a good job. Yi Bei nodded. But, just as Morpheus and the group of scientists were about to continue speaking, Yi Bei spoke again. And quote, actually, it doesn't have to be so complicated. There's no need to merge the entire spatial fragment together. How about this? We first absorb the Earth into one of the spatial fragments? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. At first, everyone thought Yi Bei was going to say something. In the end, after hearing this, the entire control room fell silent. The atmosphere was a little strange. Put the Earth into the space fragment? To be honest, Yi Bei's words caught the scientists in the room by surprise. Even Caesar, who had come with Yi Bei, was very surprised. This was a little different from what he had expected. Sensing that the atmosphere was a little off, Yi Bei didn't waste any time. And quote, I still have my own thoughts. When I was able to survive in the spatial fragments, I devoured a lot of them. In fact, those spatial fragments are all stored in the forest of death. Put Earth into a space fragment, then put it into the forest of death, and then do the same for the other planets in the solar system. This way, the speed will be much faster. Then, all the researchers will work in the forest of death and find a way to glue the space fragments together. In fact, Yi Bei had already had this idea when Caesar had first mentioned that he was going to move the entire solar system into a spatial fragment. It was just that he had only brought it up now. King. Caesar's voice was hesitant. It's starting already. Morpheus clearly didn't react in time. By then, the scientists around him would be in a completely different situation. All right, Earth is the origin of the entire snake civilization, so we should put Earth in first. Someone said. And quote, I have no objections. After all, absorbing a planet into a space fragment is still in the theoretical state. If we use Earth as an experiment, it might not be too bad. End quote. Someone immediately replied. However, Morpheus, Neo, and Trinina's facial muscles twitched violently when they heard that. Using Earth as an experiment? If we fail, we'll all be finished. Neo growled unceremoniously. If Yi Bei hadn't been here, this guy would probably have rushed up to some of the scientists and given them a good beating. But, after more than a minute of debate, the final result was decided. Now, the Earth was sucked into the space fragment. After that, he would look for an opportunity to merge with other spaces. And Yi Bei directly transmitted this decision to the minds of every living creature on Earth through his mental power domain. Everyone, Earth is the core of the snake race civilization. Ever since the tri-body civilization, the beast god civilization, and the other universal beings appeared, our location has been completely exposed. Therefore, we've decided to put Earth in an independent space. This way, no other civilization will be able to discover it. Yi Bei's voice was cold. This was the final decision. Walala. And when Yi Bei's voice rang out, all the living beings on Earth were in shock. End quote. Put the Earth into the space fragment? F***CK, what's he doing? End quote. It reminds me of some ideas from the era of human civilization. For example, bringing an Earth with you? End quote. It's just the dark forest theory. I absolutely support the king's decision. In the future, as civilization develops, this step will have to be taken sooner or later. End quote. Amazing. I just want to know how to collect this. The decision was made. Some of the creatures felt uneasy. However, most of the other creatures were in full agreement. In Area 51, King, in order to take Earth into the spatial fragment, we must first open a huge hole in the spatial fragment. a hole that can accommodate the entire Earth. This will require some time. Morpheus stood in front of a huge calculator and explained seriously. You don't need to tell me about these things. Just start putting Earth in. Yibei flicked his tongue and interrupted Morpheus. Yes. The next moment, Morpheus no longer hesitated. He walked to a calculator. Tap, 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 tap. His 10 fingers had reached an unimaginable level as he quickly tapped on the keyboard. 1 second, 2 seconds, 10 seconds. Only 10 seconds had passed, but Yibei could clearly sense a terrifying energy appear around the Earth. That energy seemed to be able to devour everything. Outside the atmosphere, countless space vortexes appeared. If Yibei hadn't informed all of the creatures beforehand, perhaps countless creatures would have flown their battleships and started a war after this situation occurred. 20 seconds. More and more space vortexes appeared around the Earth. Tap, 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 tap. In Area 51, the entire control room was filled with the sound of dense keyboard tapping. Countless scientists broke out in cold sweat. However, it was definitely unprecedented for the Earth to be sucked into a single space fragment. Therefore, even though they were nervous, their eyes were filled with excitement. It'll be great if I can successfully complete it. End quote. If that's the case, Earth will be completely safe. End quote. End quote. It will definitely be completed. After all, the technology has long matured. We've done tens of thousands of experiments before. This time, we'll only enlarge the experimental body countless times and the space fragment at the same time. End quote. End quote. Continue. The crucial moment is coming. Don't be distracted. End quote. The scientists were typing away on their computers as they spoke. Yibei sat there quietly. His spiritual power domain covered the entire Earth and observed everything. As for Caesar, he quietly stood guard beside Yibei. Walala. As a large number of space vortexes appeared around the Earth, extremely violent energy began to brew in them. The energy formed a terrible storm, and the entire atmosphere was shaking wildly, making loud, crashing sounds. There were simply too many energy vortexes. In an instant, hundreds of millions of them appeared. After these vortexes appeared, they all aimed at Earth and began to devour it. End quote. Devouring an entire planet. This should be a precedent. If it's completed, it'll be too useful in the future. End quote. Yibei watched quietly, occasionally sighing with emotion. However, compared to Yibei's calmness, when the Earth was about to be sucked into the space debris, the entire solar system, and even the entire universe, started to shake. Among them, the ones who reacted the fastest were the ant tribe on the moon. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. The Earth gradually disappeared. The moon's gravitational pull was immediately affected. The entire moon began to tremble with a loud rumble, as if it was about to deviate from its flight path and self-destruct. Venus, Mu planet, Mars, on Mercury, Uranus, Pluto. In the solar system, all the planets began to move. But, just as these stars were acting strangely, the hundreds of millions of vortexes around the Earth suddenly connected together and formed a huge, pitch-black mouth. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. A huge mouth appeared. The Earth was being devoured bit by bit in front of countless living beings. It was a shocking scene.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.